What do we
All
have as
right.
our fourth album this week?
So this is Big Star with their album Third slash Sister Lovers. I guess Josh has it's best ever album says it's just called Third.
Yeah.
So it comes in at number 148 on best ever albums in the 1970s, number 12 in 1978, number 616 of all time, and it did make Rolling Stone's list, coming at number 285. So I wasn't. You guys covered, what was it, number one record and Radio City,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was my my COVID week. So I was bummed to miss out on that, because I do know those albums, and I've liked them very much. This was an interesting listen because I really didn't know any of the songs on this, and this was different than what I was expecting. This was a
You and me both.
Yeah.
yeah,
Me too.
this is dark. This is like a darker, sadder Big
sure.
Star that's going on. So I don't know what the heck's happening in Alex Chilton's life. So, but there's something's going on. You know, there's the pop element isn't there as much. It's still there, you know, here and there. There's still some really pretty parts, but this is much more, you know, kind of delves into some experimentation with some of the sounds of the instruments. There's a lot of songs done kind of in more minor keys. There's some discordant stuff going on. Some of the songs seem like they're unfinished, or that they're kind of demos almost. Maybe some stuff on the cutting room floor. There's some interesting echoey and it's sometimes lo-fi production that's going on here. And it just seems very different than the first two, which, you know, number one record, I think, was much more of a polished production. You know, Radio City was kind of more, a little bit gritty, almost like a garage rock, but still very upbeat. And so this was not what I was expecting it to be. And I was kind of getting a little bit of a Lou Reed, Velvet Underground, Leonard Cohen vibe from this, you know, particularly with the last couple of
Femme
songs.
Fatale is literally a Velvet
cover.
Underground
No,
cover.
I knew that. Right. Yes. No. But even beyond that, you know, not just with that particular song, but like the last three songs or something, it just seems very, like this, like an acoustic thing. And by the end of it, I'm like, this sounds like kind of Leonard Cohen type stuff, like that sad, melancholy Leonard Cohen thing. So I'm kind of, on one listen, I'm kind of mixed. I think it was hard for me to kind of, listen to this expecting one thing and kind of getting a different thing, and not really grasping that until, I don't know, maybe halfway through. So that was an interesting aspect of this listen. I mean, some stuff was out more upbeat, like the Jesus Christ was kind of a more of an upbeat. I was getting that was like very much like a Bird song, particularly with the harmonies that they were doing, so there's still some upbeat stuff here, but just as an overall whole, I mean, there's 14 tracks on here. So, that was my overall feeling. I mean, hell, there's a song on here called Holocaust, right? So, and it, like, what is it? The lines are, you're a wasted face, you're a sad-eyed lie, you're a Holocaust. It's like, what the hell is going on here? So, interesting listen. I think I need a little bit more time with this to process what's going on here, because I was not expecting this.
Yeah, so you were correct in it being, it was never properly finished or released at the time when it was recording. It seems like there was a tumultuous production. It was actually started in 1974, and then it went by many names. It was originally released in 1978, finally, with the title Third, as the third album, and then it was reissued in 1985 as Sister Lovers Third, third slash Sister Lovers, because at one time it was called Sister Lovers, among other names. And it also, you're right, it documents the band's deterioration as well as the declining mental state of Alex Chilton. So there, you were right on, and that's what I picked up as well. It was not as polished. It was not as kind of catchy and singular as in the way that those first two Big Star albums that we listened to were. It didn't seem as influential. It really did kind of feel like a mess in some aspects. The first, also, we haven't talked about kind of the different song orders that the albums were released in. There's like many different ways to listen to the track order, because the different labels release the albums in different ways, and so I kind of listened to the US release of this, but there was a UK release as well that had and some songs are like not on there and completely shuffled in different orders and stuff, so it's a little confusing. And then there's also kind of like a huge box set that includes every demo and outtake and song that there was. So it's real, if you're interested in being a completist like that, you can check that out. But yes, I felt I enjoyed the first half of this album more than the second half. If it is a real like stark difference too, because I feel like the first half is real upbeat and happy, and then it really descends into like sadness and
yeah, that's a good point, Josh.
In terms
that's
of
true.
tone. So I really like the Big Star that harkens back to the jangly stuff that we've talked about before, and just kind of that tight pop sound that was unique to them. And unsurprisingly, this album also did not sell well. No surprise there, actually. And because it just feels like a rougher version of the band overall, unrefined, I would say. So yeah, in terms of like sound, it's hard to say. They still are guitar based. They still kind of have, it's like they're trying but not making it. It's real like a work in progress in some ways.
I thought this was a really interesting album because the first two albums are the shimmery pop punk, lead into a certain type of 80s, 90s sound, as we've talked about before, that very clearly lead to, our lineage from like, there's like the Byrds to Big Star to like what would become REM and the Smiths and all the like early 90s, rock bands, Lemonheads and stuff like that, all that different stuff, right? Power pop bands. Even U2, right? You can throw in that a little bit. There's elements of what Big Star does with that. This album also portends a different type of alternative rock, but this is a more broody, mopey alternative rock that I would say is kind of like, it's got, the first thing that came to mind for me on this album when I listened to it is like, this album's like a replacements album, but if they just did like swing and party, like as like a theme, like the song swing and party, like, every Replacements album has one of these melancholy songs that you're not quite sure if it's, if the singer's okay, and it's just very sad. It can be beautiful in its own way, but sad. Lyrically, I got two themes on this album. One is disillusionment with not breaking, right? And the second is a love affair that either ended or is just not fulfilling. And I wonder, the Sister Lovers, I know that the theme is that the two members of the band, I think it's him and Alex Stevens, I want to say, is the other guy's name. Is Joey Stevens? Okay,
Jody is. I think he's the drummer.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said Alex Chilton and Jody Stevens. Yeah, they're dating sisters, right? And I think there's a little bit of a theme there, like that they're the two of them. It's sort of a compilation of their ideas, but it's definitely not the overriding theme, even if it's there. You guys have mentioned it, and I would agree. It seems like it's more pulled together into an album than a cohesive idea. I think that's why sometimes you just get, and I listened to the one with the bonus tracks, so you got like a weird like Kinks cover in there at one point, and I'm like, that's interesting that Till the End of the Day came in. I think they did a good job on Femme Fatale, but I'll be honest, the more we listen to music, the more I realize just how fucking much I love those Velvet Underground albums. Every single one of those albums has grown like by 10 to 15 points, probably in my final rankings. And I'll even go so far as to say that Nico album has grown in my thing too, because I can appreciate like a song like Femme Fatale that if they hadn't, like that song, because the Velvets, right, didn't put like flutes and all the strings around it, it sounded great. And there is a part of me that's like, in another world, if I heard that Nico album, without the strings and stuff, I probably would have liked it a lot more than I did, but we were early in the podcast. And anyway, that's a side thing altogether there. But yeah, it's weird that Femme Fatale just comes out of nowhere. It's like, oh, Velvet song right there at number 5. I'd say I'm in the middle on this one. I definitely didn't like this album as much as I liked Number One Record and Radio City. With that being said, I was intrigued by this album throughout because of the fact that I didn't quite know what they were going for. I also think this album would be a grower. I think the more I
Yeah.
listen to this album, I think the more I'd connect with it. I think I was just I don't know if like you guys, I came in with as much of an idea of what I thought it was going to sound like, because it is much later than the other two albums. Like 5 years, right? I think past.
78 4. Radio City was released in 74. This is 78.
Well, and if you remember, Radio City sounded very different than Number One Record did.
Yeah, that's true.
Radio City was my favorite of the three, but they're a different band, and they sound like a band that's both desperate and almost cynical at the same time, and that's the vibe I got on this album. Tonally, I mean, there's still the pieces of power pop that Alex Chilton's kind of known for, right? But I don't know if it was just where he was at in his life, or he doesn't have Chris Bell or the other members anymore to sort of refine the musical sound. But it's I think I heard it described